This is Marina from YPARD. We are now live and ready to kickstart this webinar on using social media to mobilize a team. And we are delighted to welcome the renowned Peter Casier, who is the freelance social media coordinator and team agitator. Peter has been working on a lot of social media projects around global and regional conferences. And we are also honored to welcome two guest contributors. So unfortunately, Olumide Aidowu from Nigeria will still have some problems to connect. But Olumide is a campaign specialist and team lead of Climate Wednesday. And we also have Justin Smith from ILO, the International Labour Organization, and former social media coordinator at WFP, the World Food Programme. So thank you so much for being with us, Peter, Aido, and Justin. We have 110 registrants for this webinar, so we welcome you all. And there is one technical tip we want to share with you. So on the right-hand side of your screen, you should see a chat box. So we welcome you to leave your questions there anytime during the webinar, and then our guests will address your questions and comments during the Q&A session later. But don't hesitate to leave your questions there whenever you want during this webinar. So, all right, that's the time to give the floor to Peter, and I wish you all a fantastic learning experience.
Thank you, Marina, and thanks to YPARD for organizing this, and thanks for Justin to join us already. And Olumide is still trying to connect from Nigeria. And I can see on the video that I have my demons here on my left-hand side or right-hand side. So see, this is the bad demons that I'm going to try to bring to you. We're working today on social media and online teams. In the past 10 years, 15 years, I've been fortunate to work with the UN, not on social media, but I was heading an intervention team. So whenever there was a humanitarian emergency, be it a flood or a war or an earthquake, our team would fly in as the first responders. And in that, the way that I learned as a manager of that team, the way that a team is organized, the way that a team functions is the most critical component. Beyond the work itself, beyond the equipment that they're using, if the team itself is not well organized and is not functioning well, then the project will not run well. So over the past 10, 15 years, as a manager, I started to focus on team dynamics. And that's a little bit what I want to bring into this discussion and this webinar. Marina, if we can bring the slides up.
There we go.
There we go. Thank you, Marina. We go to the next one. If we look at what really defines a team, for me there is a difference between a group of people and a team of people. If we think of a group of people might be a group of people taking a bus. They all want to do the same thing. They all want to go into the same direction. They even might, as we know in many places in Africa, when we take matatus, help each other loading luggages and getting on and getting off the matatu. But that by itself is a group of people. That does not make a team. One of the big differences between a group and a team for me is purpose. By that I mean a certain direction, a certain goal for a group of people. Think of it, people going to watch a football match in a stadium, for instance. They all coming together with a common interest, but then watch their favorite football team or an interesting match, as Belgium won against the Italians last week. But again, that is a mass of people. That doesn't make a team. They miss a clear purpose, and they also miss a clear structure. It is just a crowd of people. Yes, Marina. The second thing that differentiates a group of people with a team is also a structure. And by this, I don't mean a very elaborate structure, but they clearly miss a crowd of people doesn't necessarily have a facilitator, doesn't necessarily have a leader, or when things become complex, have a delegated structure of people responsible for different things. Again, think of it of a crowd of people going to watch a football match. There is no structure in that. They're a crowd. They're not a team. If we elaborate, yes, Marina, if we elaborate a little bit on how do we create a purpose, turning a group of people into a team? For me, one of the most important aspects is to define your objectives. What is your goal? What are you trying to achieve? This is the what you want to do. From there, you go and define your process, which is having defined your goals, how do you want to achieve your goals? How do you want to reach them over time? And if by preference, I like to define for teams measurable goals, which will make it much easier for people to measure their progress as your project is going on. This is particularly important if you have a project with a limited time duration, and it's a challenge for you as a manager, as a team facilitator, to set clear key performance indicators for the team itself. But it will be great for the team itself as they're working along during a number of months towards the project goal to see how far they are or how close they are to the different goals. And then as the fourth component of how to create a purpose, define who can be part of this team or who is part of the team. It's clear that for many projects that we do, especially on social media outreach, not just about everybody can be part of the team. It will also define somewhere an entity for the team itself. So this is how we create a purpose. The second part, which is differentiating a crowd of people with a team, for me is structure. Far and foremost important is to have somebody who either is a leader or is a facilitator of the group. It depends a little bit on which environment you work, whether you work in a work environment, in a professional environment, where people report to a manager, or if you work, like we often work, with a group of volunteers. The more that people work with volunteers, the less formal that structure should be. And very often we define that structure as the project goes on. Typically, for the projects that I run on social media, which is always based on volunteers and volunteering members, I start with the facilitation, and then as the project picks up momentum, we define roles for different sub-projects or different tools, people who can be the focal points or the coordinators for certain tasks. But this typically, working with volunteers, I don't define on forehand. Also because many times I don't know which people I will get in my team. And the group gradually grows as the project is going on. And it's also probably working with in an environment like YPARD or working with online events, as we often do. You never know who you get in your team. And you never know people's strengths. You never know the time availability, their eagerness to take up roles. So we very often define roles as we go along. But the main one is the core is be clear who has the leadership of this team, who is the main facilitator. Yes, Marina. Now, this is very generic and, let's say, philosophical, the difference between a crowd and a team. Now, some of the tips I picked up over the years on what works well in a team and in the formation of a team and in the growing of a team and building a dynamic within a team. And again, certainly when you work online and when you work with volunteers, one of the crucial factors for me is to make clear what's in it for them. When we do online outreach with volunteers, people will give their time, they will give their efforts, their knowledge, they will offer to use their networks, but I want to make clear what they can get out of it. For me, one of my main selling points is when I do projects with the online volunteers is you will learn. As we typically have teams coming in, members coming in from different backgrounds with different experience, we will offer a network of people, giving people access to different expertise, and then adding my background and my experience. I give people the opportunity to learn. And I'll come with some examples in a moment. Secondly, what works for online teams, but also works for teams in a work environment, is to have a common challenge. Now, this challenge might be in a work environment, for instance, a competing team or a competing company or a competing organization, but it also might be a challenge in terms of a deadline. A team works on a certain project and tries to reach certain targets by a certain deadline. And a team galvanizes when they have this common challenge. It might also be, as we often do with online events and organizing an online social media team around events, is making clear as to in previous events, these were the figures that we were able to reach in terms of tweets with a certain hashtag, in terms of blog followers or blog posts, and make that clear and say, okay, we're going to try with this team in the next month to beat that record. So that record beating is the common challenge that people see as almost as a target to work for. Also, what works well in a team is competition, but I mean this in a friendly way. People in generic are competitive and like challenges. So often when I work with teams, I like to do small mini competitions amongst the team members, and I will give some examples in a moment, so they can test their own knowledge, their own experience. They can also learn from others, but we can also use this competition element when we go online, not only within the team, and when we do our online outreach in blog competitions or photo competitions. I'll give some examples in a moment. Next, again, certainly when you work online, when you have to manage an online dynamic, and again, if you work with volunteers, what really is important is to keep, for me, is to keep a positive spirit. People join it not to be aggravated or to go, they might have some heated discussions as long as they're positive, but people join to have fun while learning. So when running teams, for me, the positive spirit is really important. Again, certainly when you work with volunteers. Added to that would be, and that is something as a team leader or a facilitator you can project, is to have an honesty and an openness towards your team members. When things are going well, as a facilitator, I am very open and I praise. When things are not going that well, or where we have some difficulties, I'm very open and honest to the members, saying, okay, we have an issue there, let's deal with it. That creates, that helps creating that positive spirit within a team. And last but not least is the keyword momentum. Especially when you work with a social media team, with a volunteering team, and this is also true with YPARD. What is important is to define clearly the momentum you want to bring. If you have a project for a limited period and you bring volunteers together to work on that project, clearly define on forehand how you're going to work with that momentum. How, for instance, typically when we bring people together, I start with an icebreaker and ask people to introduce themselves, which starts for a week where people exchange and get to know each other. But then already as a facilitator, keep in mind what is the next step that I want to take him. How do I want to go into the business? And keep that momentum going of interactions and having the team be busy. It is really frustrating, certainly when you work on a project for a limited time. It's very frustrating to see a lot of activity, and then for one reason or another, for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, there is no activity again. So that breaks the dynamic, and each time again as facilitator, you have to build up again that dynamic because people shy away. People have other things to do. Many of them are volunteers. They have another full-time job. They have many other volunteering projects they might be working on. So once you have a momentum of email exchanges and dynamic in the team, if for 2 weeks or 3 weeks it keeps quiet, people forget about it. People forget about the project. People forget about the team. They cannot remember anymore what it was all about. So it will take you, as a facilitator, it will take you time again to build that dynamic up again. So specifically when we work on online events and building a social media outreach team for online events, we define on forehand what the main momentum moments will be and how we can bridge from one momentum to the next. Now, next, Marina. If we relate, this is quite a bit of theory on team dynamics. Now, if we relate this back again to social media and how to run social media projects with social media as the goal or social media as the mean, there are two differentiating domains I would like to tackle. First of all, is working with online teams is very different than working with a physical team, working in a physical office. For me, there are three aspects that make an online team work in terms of the internal communications. The first of all is an area of reference. Typically, with online teams, team members are being added ad hoc and on the fly. You might start with a group of 10 people, and you might end up, like with the last project I did, end up with 300 people. You will get a lot of questions as to the what and the how, what are you trying to do, how are you trying to do it, what are the different tools you're using. So I typically try to create an area of reference. So I don't have to answer all of the questions, but I can just send them to an internal site saying, here, look here, read through this. If you still have questions, please come back again. So typically I use a wiki or a Google site where I put the initial thoughts of what the project is all about, how we organize ourselves, what we're trying to do, why we're trying to do it, some of the background, and then also when we define roles within the team, stipulate all of the roles. So anybody joining in as the project goes on can go to one site as a reference link. So that's more of a static site, which is dynamically updated as the team and the project goes along. But that's the internal reference website. They call it the internal wiki. The second area is the area to interact. As we work with on social media with online teams, you need to define what your main channel of communications can be. Keeping in mind that these might be people in different time zones. It might be people that don't have different schedules, working schedules, have different allocations of time. So typically I like to do the communications asynchronously using email, but I don't use email as such. I use Google Groups, but there's many other email forums like D Groups where people can exchange. That is going to be your main channel of communications, which is important to choose on forehand, again, because you don't work with a physical team in a physical office, where it's easy to say, okay, everybody drop whatever you do, we're going to have a team meeting. Or just say every Monday morning at 9 o'clock, the whole office is meeting, the whole physical team is meeting. You can't do that. So a way to do asynchronous communications, preferably via email, is important. But that I would keep more as the more formal communications. I've learned in the past years doing social media, somewhere, depending on, again, on the size of the group, somewhere an area to play. If we interact amongst team members through an email group, let's say a Google group, very often people get overloaded by emails, so they don't see the important messages anymore. So trying to offload this into a different area, Marina, next, is an area to play. In the past, in the past project, I found a Google group, sorry, a Facebook group to be a nice area to play for the informal chit chat that people don't necessarily want to have on email, but where people can socially interact, and all of the non-formal project-related chit chat can go and can be channeled off on Facebook. But that's an option. It depends again on the size of the group and the dynamic of the group. But I found this in the past. I found this as a good way also to contribute to the team dynamic and the spirit of the group, if they have an area where they can do the informal chit chat and get to know each other. Next video. Now this is all internally in the group. Your reference site, where all of the frequently asked questions are answered, and then a way to communicate. Now, this is purely internal, but using social media to do an outreach or to do or to organize a social media project, you of course have to have everything going to the outside world. For these, again, I have three main areas. The first one is, where is your main content? So you're doing an online project, you're doing a social media project. Where do you want the traffic to go? Where is your project described? Where can people post? Where is the main information going to the external world? Typically, of course, we use a website or a blog for that. The second part is the networking. If you do a social media project, it's not good enough only to publish information on a blog or on a website. You need to reach out. Specifically, if you work on a project which has a new website, the project website, or a project blog, you start from zero. So you need to reach out through social networking to be able to bring people to get to know your content site, your blog, or your website. Typically, of course, the social media networking tools that we use are Twitter or Facebook or LinkedIn. Google Plus, although for me doesn't work very well for networking. Very often also we reach out to the people in the social media team to go through their networks and link people from their own social media networks into your content network. But as a third part also, typically when I do social media projects, I don't want to define everything on forehand. I like to keep things guided and driven by the social media team itself, by my team of volunteers. So also keep an area of experimenting. You might, as a group coordinator, have in mind when you do a social media project to use a blog and Facebook, for instance, but somewhere the group drives to use Instagram as a networking tool. Let them experiment with this. If it works, the better. If it doesn't work, we've learned, and we picked up some good lessons learned as we go along. But leave that room for experimenting, even if you go towards the external world. So these are the three components: a place for your public content, your website or your blog, and an area, tools you're going to use to network. Okay, Marina, that's all in terms of slides. We can go back again to my video. We will talk with three people, and I saw that Alumide was just joining. Marina, did you see Alumide coming up?
Yes, he joined, but he's not here anymore.
Okay. So what I wanted to do is, with 3 people who have experience in social media, translate a little bit this theoretical background into practical examples. I'll start with a project that we just finished, which was Forest 2015, which was a project that ran over 5 months in the preparation of a conference. We started basically from scratch. There was an FAO website, which had some information, was more static and formal information, and there was an FAO forestry Twitter account, but that was managed by the FAO people. So we had to start the social media team from scratch. Relating back again to the slides that we just saw, coming back again to how to organize a team internally, as an internal reference site, we use the Google site, which for me is easier to manage than the wiki software available on the market. It doesn't look very sexy, but it's very easy to update information as the team goes along. Then, can you mute Alumide, Marina? Oh, I think he's on a cyber cafe on the street in Abuja or something. How we interacted, I always use a Google group and an email forum, which for me works very well. You can have anybody with any address registering. The only hiccup that we have with Google Group, or the only disadvantage, is that if people want to browse past discussions online, they need to have a Gmail address. But it's about the only fallback. In the past, I've also used D groups, but that is not for free. But you can use any email communications software, but Google Group for me has in the past years proven to be the most flexible. And then the area to play for us was the Facebook group. And in the end, we ended up with almost as many people in the Facebook group, the chit-chat group, the informal chit-chat group, as well as on the Google group. But it was interesting how this came about, because the group grew to about 300, in the end 315 people in the volunteering group, and there was a lot of email traffic. So people started to complain of getting an overload from the group. So activity is good. Too much activity, certainly on email, is not good. So that's why we started the Google group to say, okay, everything which is informal chit-chat, go to the Facebook group, and you can put up everything you wanted over there. So in the end, we ended up 315 people. To give you an idea, in the Google group, our internal interaction or internal communications tool, we had about 570 emails exchanged over the period of 5 months. So that's quite a bit of activity. I think this comes to about 3 or 4 emails per day. Of those 315 people, about 70 were on site at the conference. The main target of our project, and about 54 were part of a training. And this was one of the main what's in it for me parts in this whole project. As we had such a large volunteering team, and there was quite a bit of eagerness to contribute, I fear that people would lose sight as to how, not only how they could contribute, but also what they would get out of it. So I thought we have a large team, but I was fearing that people would drop out, not understanding exactly what they could get out of it. So what I did is I gave regular updates on the background of the project, but also on the things that were happening behind the scenes that people didn't necessarily see or experience themselves. So I gave them background on the progress of the Twitter hashtag performance, for instance. I gave them background on our sub-project working on webcasting and all of the technical difficulties that we faced and how we tried to overcome this. So I shared the information of what was going behind the scenes, so people who wanted to learn on how to run online events could learn as we went along. And I wasn't shy when things didn't work very well. I would also share it with them and try to maybe see with the team what we could do in terms of overcoming these challenges. And I can tell you, if you have a team of over 300 social media enthusiasts, there's always somebody that comes up with a bright idea that you haven't, even as a facilitator or a team leader, you haven't even thought of. Also, in terms of what's in it for you, we organized a social media bootcamp for the people coming to the conference of 3 days, giving an induction on social media tools and social reporting just before the conference. Plus, we gave 5 days of mentoring during the conference itself, when all of the social media bootcamp participants would do social reporting at the conference itself. And that was combined with giving the space with the team to experiment. There were some things that I hadn't thought of on forehand within this team. For instance, the use of a Facebook group to channel the chit-chat. That was something that came up as an idea within the group. I hadn't thought of using Instagram, so some people came up with the idea and started to build an Instagram dynamic. The use of tools to make posters, templates that we could use to put out tweets or Facebook posts or pictorial quotes for Twitter, for instance. These were all ideas that came out from the team and that people picked up from each other and started to learn from each other. In terms of the tools that we used towards the external world, the main content tool for us was the WordPress blog. We used a simple WordPress.com blog. If you ever want to start for a project itself, a simple blog, for me, WordPress.com is the way to go. It comes for free, although you have to pay a small fee if you want to avoid the commercial ads on it, the advertisement, or if you want to customize a template. But it comes pretty much pre-packed with a number of templates, a number of widgets and tools to manage it. It's a complete package. These days, we prefer WordPress versus Blogger or any other blogging tool, or even a self-hosted WordPress blog. So WordPress.com for me in the past conferences has worked very well, especially if it is a blog you want to start up at very low cost, very fast. It takes literally 10 minutes to set up a WordPress.com blog, and something that only has a lifespan for the duration of your project. So this was our main outreach tool. Then we used Twitter, Facebook, a little bit of Instagram as the main networking tool, but we didn't want people to follow our own Twitter account for the conference, our own Facebook account for the conference. We mainly worked with people within the volunteering team to plug into their own network. So for instance, when a new blog post would be coming out, people would Twitter from their accounts or their Facebook page to reach out to their communities. And that's how this was one of the key factors of the success of building an online momentum using your core team. While we only had 300 people in the core social media volunteering team, in the end we had a large Twitter community that we could reach through the networks of each of those individual people. If I look at some of the key figures for Twitter, I think we had over, was it 7,000 contributors on Twitter using the conference hashtag. 8,600 to be exact. So we didn't have 8,600 people in our social media team, but those 300 who were the core social media volunteering team reached out to their network, and that's how we got, in the end, over 8,000 people contributing to the Twitter conversation. Now, something to say, I mentioned in my introduction slides the friendly competition. And we did this both internally in the team as well as externally. Internally, we had something that came up at ad hoc, wasn't planned on forehand, but we had an internal Twitter contest. Who in the social media team could create the most inventive and the most creative tweets. So we asked people to create a number of tweets on about blog posts that we had on our blog, on our conference blog. And then people could favor the tweets that they themselves thought which were very inventive. I would give, during a period of, I think it was 2 weeks or 3 weeks, a daily update of what I thought would be the nicest tweets that I saw the team tweeting, why I found them good, so that people could compare their tweets with others and see somebody tweeted about the same blog post. What did he or she do different from me? And why was this working better than mine? Or why was mine better than theirs? We didn't have much of a prize. We gave a book to the best voted tweets. But what's important is that even with this little competition, we achieved a couple of things. First of all, people started to actively tweet. They also brought in tweets they thought more about their tweets. So also the Twitter activity was of a higher quality. But beyond that also, because everybody was reaching out to their own Twitter community, we started to get much more activity on our blog, much more traffic on our blog. So it served several purposes at the same time. And people started to learn about what makes a good tweet and what works or what doesn't work. But also towards the external world, and we see this more and more now, and we try to build an online momentum, that a competition element is built in. I think about 3 or 4 years ago, blog competitions or photo competitions as part of an online outreach project was not very common. Now almost every single online event that is trying to build an online momentum uses these. For our project, we used 2 public competitions. The first one was to recruit youth speakers. We had, if I remember well, 5 slots for young people who would be paid to come to the conference and speak at the conference. But we wanted people to compete for those 5 positions. And they could compete by making a video, introducing themselves and the projects that they're working on, and a couple of introductory paragraphs, and we will put these up onto the blog. People, the online public, was encouraged to vote for these entries and to comment on them. So we did a pre-selection of the youth speakers based on the amount of comments that each of those entries on our blog had, the amount of likes they had, and the amount of page views. Now that served 2 purposes. First of all, it gave the people, the young people who introduced their project, a platform to speak and to introduce their project, even if they wouldn't be chosen as youth speakers. But it also served the purpose that for us, because we had started our blog from scratch, we literally created this blog in May, 5 months before the conference, it started to build an online momentum. So lots of people came in because they were invited by the young people who reached out to their network, asking people to comment on their videos, on their applications, and to watch their video. So in the end, we ended up with quite a bit of traffic. The second competition that we did was a blog competition on topics related to the conference, which in the end we had, I think, 63 entries, which again generated a lot of traffic because once again we asked people to leave a comment on these blog posts. And we encouraged the people who posted these blog posts to enter a dialogue with the people commenting. So we had quite a bit of online dialogue going on in the comments, which was one of the purposes of our social media outreach. So in the end, those 2 competitions added a little bit. We also had a photo competition more run on the FEO website. We also had young people posting tree-hugging photos because the conference was all about forests and trees. We asked young people to post tree-hugging photos that we all put in a repository, but mainly the youth speaker applications and the blog competition itself created quite a bit of a momentum. We had 120,000 page views in basically in 4 months' time. We had a total on the blog of 294 blog posts, and we had a record amount of 8,400 comments on those 294 blog posts. So with that competition, the external competition, we reached an online momentum. We also reached the goal of creating an online dialogue about the topics of the conference itself. And people started to think and talk online about the topic of forests and trees, which was one of the purposes of the conference. I talked in my introductory slides about the momentum, building a momentum within the team. We divided it on forehand in terms of the planning in 4 main periods. We had with our internal team, we said, okay, we're going to let people introduce themselves. At the moment that we had a certain quorum, and the quorum was 100 online members. So we asked people to introduce themselves, and already then people started to network online through the Google group. Then for the next 2 months, the main momentum was working on the on advocacy, where young people would apply for youth speaker posts. The content that they posted was mostly forestry advocacy content. So that was more generic on the topic of forestry, not necessarily related to the topics to be discussed at the conference itself. That was for the first 2 months. Then in the planning, we had 2 months where we would push for people to submit blog posts in the blog competition. But the blog post had to be about the core topics of the conference and fall within one of the, I thought it was 5 or 6 categories of the conference itself. So that was already gearing that online momentum more towards the conference itself and the main topics of the conference. And then the last month before the conference, the online competitions were closed. Then we asked people participating at the conference to start introducing their session at the conference. So we are shifting from general advocacy onto what is actually going to be discussed at the conference itself. But this created a nice momentum. There were some peaks, but there was never a low where there was no traffic. When there was nothing to do for the social media team, there was always something that they could work on. And last bit, when I talked in the introduction slides about giving the group, the online team, a common challenge, is what we set up as a target from the beginning is we wanted to do better than previous projects. For all the projects I do, I keep statistics on the amount of hashtag tweets and the amount of comments and page views that we have for the blog, etc. So we defined a number of targets. We wanted to beat that. And gradually, as the momentum among the social media team picked up, also they started to look at what the targets were, and they were seeing that we're coming closer to the target. So that became a very aggressive social media marketing team in the end. And in the end, yes, we did beat most of the records that we set in the previous online events, which will make it a challenge for the next one that we will organize. So that's a little bit of the background of my philosophy of what makes teams work, and with a practical example. Now I would like to switch. Let me see if Alumide is online. Marina, if we can unmute Alumide, let's see if he comes through. Alumide. I still see him as muted, Marina?
Yes, for some reason I do not have control on it anymore.
Hello.
Oh, okay, perfect.
Alumide.
Yeah, what's up?
Thank you for joining us. It went with a little bit of challenges, I heard.
Yeah, I'm actually on the street. I'm on the road of Lagos.
Welcome. We have 41 people online watching at the moment. So from the roots of Lagos, Alumide, could you please briefly introduce yourself and what project that you're working on?
Okay, my name is Olumide Idowu. I'm talking from Nigeria, specifically from Lagos State. Yeah, I'm the campaign specialist for Climate Wednesday. I came up with Climate Wednesday that was 2 years back, 2013, where we want to see how we can bring young people together to also discuss about climate justice, to talk about how to hear from what people want to hear from them, like what the government, what the civil society, and what different levels of people want to hear from young people when it comes to issues on climate justice. So how do we do this? The platform is called Climate Wednesday, and is an hashtag that we use to connect every young people. Specifically, this project is specifically for Nigerians and Africa, and for other countries that want to join, there's no problem, but it's specifically targeting the issues that surround Nigeria and Africa. And we think locally, but we act globally. So that's our Climate Wednesday. And one of the things I'm going to be talking about is how do we use this platform to engage young people, to bring people to talk about issues that affect them. So um, every Wednesday, like today, we are going to be having Climate Wednesday, which we are going to be talking about the children, how affects young people, how climate change affects children. So, and this will be coming up after in 2 hours after this our chat, because I purposely moved the time because of this conversation we want to have now. So every Wednesday we have a platform called Climate Wednesday where people come together and discuss about a particular issue. And one of the things, how do we do this? How do we bring people together? How do we make sure that we have a traffic of people that are going to connect to this platform? What we do basically is to do a lot of promo, and we have mostly we do a lot of research on issues that affect us, talking about the climate change issues. So one of the things that we do is to do a research for young do a research on different topics that are linked to climate change. And today's topic is what we are talking about: children and climate change. And for the past 6 months, we have come together as young people, my team, to come up with different topics that we're going to be talking about. And what we do again is to target a speaker that is very sound and that can discuss these issues. And our speakers is very between the young people and the middle class. We're talking about the civil society people, so that they can also talk to us about what the challenges they are facing and how the solutions can come up. So we do all this research to make sure that we have our content, our details before the main tweet chat, which is coming up, which comes up on every Wednesday. So during that period also, we make sure that we do a lot of research so that we can come up with 5 to 10 topics, to 10 questions for the guests to talk about and to deliberate about. Why are we doing this? Is because we notice that social media is a platform that brings people together, especially people that have access to internet and have access to system to use to communicate. And we don't only keep it online, we also have our ground research that we do. We have our team that also work for us in 6 geopolitical zones in Nigeria, whereby they go on ground to see how things are affecting people when it comes to climate change and environmental issues. And with all this, we make sure that we gather those online and offline together. And people ask us that after our tweet meet, where do we send our reports to? Okay, one of our success story basically is Climate Wednesday has been adopted by United Nations Environmental Program, UNEP in Kenya. That is the African office in Kenya, which they also are always request for all our reports every Wednesday, so that they can add it to the young people's voice when they're talking about. There's a program they call Tunza. Tunza is a Swahili name. It's a project that's set up by UNEP to hear young people's voice. So our own report also adds to that report for them to also know that, okay, fine, from Nigeria and from the few people from Africa, this is what they're talking about on these particular issues. So that is one of our success story, because people have been able to share their views and connect to what is happening on ground. And if you go through our website, you will notice that we don't only do the tweet meet alone. We also, the platform is also for to share information and opportunities with young people that want to tap into all those opportunities. And we also help people to also put the research that they do online to allow people to know more about what they are doing on ground. So with this, let me now move a little bit on how we gather people to know about our event that is coming up. So one of the things we do.
Alumni, sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah.
Event, you mean the Twitter chat, right?
Okay. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. Maybe explain them a bit to people who don't know Climate Wednesday. So you have your website, your blog, climatewednesday.org, and I sent the link in the chat window here. So you have your blog/website, which has a lot of climate-related content. Then you also have a Facebook page, and you have
Yes.
a Twitter account. How do those different elements work together for you?
So our Twitter handle is basically to connect people that are online also. That's the Twitter handle that we use to do the tweet chats. And basically the hashtag we use is Climate Wednesday.
Mm-hmm.
That is hashtag we use every Wednesday. So that if you are tweeting or you are telling us about you are talking about a particular topic, you have to use the hashtag to communicate with us and to talk to us so that we can track and know numbers of people and actually people that are connecting and talking about it. Then our Facebook platform is also a platform that we use to share our information and to share the upcoming events and platforms. One of the things that we are working on basically is to gather the resources and all the stories, all the information we have been gathering on our topics and tweet chats. We are gathering them to put them on a website. Very soon it's going to come live. It's because it's going to come up live because there's a lot of content that we are really working on, and we have a lot of pictures we are also working on because we do offline research whereby we want to see how the environmental issue in a particular community. If it is a road we are tackling, to see how irrigation system and stuff is going on. We have lots of content of pictures. We have lots of information from people that in the next 1 to 2 months, immediately after COP conference, we are going to be putting all those information on our website on a link strictly for so that people will is to promote those topics on our different channels. But basically, what we are doing now is to be gathering those information, those reports, those people's views online, and put them in a report. So we always have a report in a PDF format, which we send to some of our partners organizations that want to also tap into what people are saying on the platform. So that is what we do. So our website, the website we have currently, that is climatewed.org, is to basically share information with people, share stories of climate change issues, share stories of information on environment, health, renewable energy, sustainable development, everything that is linked into social justice that young people are talking about. So yeah, sorry, that is what our platform is doing basically for now. That's a web climate web.
And you
So
use the you use your website also to give as you have a Twitter chat every Wednesday to give the background information preparing a Twitter chat. I have seen. Now, for the people who are not familiar, what is it? Can you describe what is a Twitter chat? How do you organize this?
okay, so one of the things we do basically is to okay, I told you about the research we do for 6 months, 6 months span of topics. So one of the things we do is to look at the young people that are very, very sound, that they know what they are doing, and we want them to be our guests. So we research for these young people that are doing something in their community, and we use them as a guest. And one of the things we do again is to move closer to our partner, to get our partners to also be a guest on our platform. Because one of the things that we make sure that we do is not to leave both sides of. We make sure that we merge them together. As we are hearing from young people, also hearing from the middle level people that they've actually passed through this process and they've gone through the research and read a lot about these issues. So what we do is to gather the information at the database of those people, and now tell them about our database of topics that we have for the next 6 months. So we now tag them into those topics so that they will prepare towards that topic and share with us what they want to see and how young people can also add to those information. So our chit chat, like an example now, is that mostly we have 5 or 10 top questions for our guests to get ready for them to talk to us. Then those questions, we don't share it with the public. We only share it with our guests. Then immediately after our chit chat, then we have Q&A session where people will now ask questions and contribute. So there's a difference between contributions.
Online in real time using Twitter, correct?
Yes, real time. So we have our Q&A session in 2 ways. One way is to make sure that the question comes in immediately after the two chats. Then after the question and answer, then we now move to contributions, because there's difference between people contributing to what the guest speaker has talked about, and there's difference between people asking questions and the guest speaker responds to them. So do you get those 2 points? Yeah.
Yep.
So that is how we make sure that we don't have a problem when it comes to this one is asking questions, this one is contributing. We make sure that we put a timeline to everything we do, so that we don't have problem of this one is asking questions, this one is contributing, because we want to follow everything at the same time. So before those topics, we always do what we call our rules and regulation and stuff like that, just for people to know how to connect online and how to talk about our chit chats. So another thing I want to talk again is now, like we are bringing in a buffer, like a radio platform on our new website that is coming up, so that our guests is going to give us a voice message where we are going to upload apart from the chit chat itself, so that people will listen to that to the voice notes before the chit chat, so that one will get them prepared on the introduction of what the chit chat is going to be all about. So another section is coming up for us to be doing that also. So all these things are in pipeline, but one of the key things I want to say here is that our strong channel or our platform that we use to connect with people is the Twitter. We use it very well to connect, and the hashtag is very powerful for us, because that's what we use in tracking numbers of people and how people are actually talking about issues that we are actually working on.
Very good.
So,
thank you, Olumide.
Thank you very much.
Definitely, I see already comments coming in the chat channel over here that people like the website. Joan from, I think she's also in Nigeria, says, I have a crush on the Climate Wednesday website. It's easy on the eye and good navigation. Good job. So thanks for joining us, Olumide.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you. Stay online, because we might have some questions coming in for you. I would like to switch over from the streets of Lagos to the streets of Geneva.
Sorry? Hello?
Yeah, Olumide, I'm switching over to Justin now. Okay?
Okay. Okay, so like the question will come in what time? All right, no problem.
Okay. Yeah. Very good. Justin, I think you're unmuted.
Yep.
Oh, very good. Justin, joining us from Geneva, from the International Labour Organization, but we know each other from the older WFP times, where you're also were the social media coordinator, and I think you were at the very birth of social media at WFP. And if you look a little bit at their statistics right now, the amount of people they have in both ILO and WFP, the amount of people that they have followers in the social media crowd, WFP over 1 million Twitter followers, ILO 65,000. On Facebook, WFP has 700,000, ILO has 200,000. These are figures that many of us can only dream of. So could you tell me, first of all, typically what is your role? What was it in WFP? What is it in ILO? What do you do? What does a social media coordinator do?
Well, I've worked in social media for about five years now, and I think the one constant over those last 5 years has been that my role has been in a state of pretty much constant evolution. I think my day-to-day tasks have never been the same 1 year to the next since I started. Though frankly, I can see that changing in the near future. I think it's a role that as it spreads to various other organizations, it's becoming something that does have a sort of a more standard set of TORs. And especially because at the beginning it seemed like we were seeing big changes at the platform level, like from 1 month to the next, that we were having to adapt to. And now I think the job of community managers on especially on the big platforms like Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn is starting to plateau a little bit, or rather sort of cement around sort of the same core tasks, which is nice from a perspective, because I think it gives you the opportunity to step back and do some of that team building and team management that you did such a good job of describing before. When I started at WFP, it was my first job was to figure out what the job consisted of. I think there was a wide shared understanding at WFP at the time that was pretty new for the UN, that social media was going to be important, that it was going to be it was going to change things in a pivotal way for corporate and for organizational communications like the kind that we were doing. And my first job was to try to figure out how, and what that meant for everybody else, basically. So team building was a really core part of that from the get-go, and knowledge sharing and that kind of thing. And I think the community management sort of came after that. I mean, it was still very much a time when organizations, if they had a Facebook page or they had a Twitter account, it was something that was kind of delegated to the intern with a bit of amusement from senior management. But that changed really fast, I think, once people started seeing the numbers and the kind of metrics that we've always been able to provide in social media, and that I think has always been the ace in our sleeve. And also when they started seeing the lessons learned from behavior from the website. I think before we saw social media take hold for content-based websites, like the kind that I've always been in charge of directing traffic to, you've always had a really easy time sort of seeing what happened once the traffic came to the site, but it wasn't always clear to you, where it was coming from or why it was coming there. I mean, I think it's sort of the I mean, to make a metaphor, and probably not a very good one, I think it's the difference of sort of like having a store and being able to watch what your customers are doing inside, to having an understanding about why they came to your store to begin with, and what decisions they made before coming there, and that's the kind of understanding that I think social media still affords.
Yeah.
So as far as building the numbers, I think those are great, and of course they're always at the top of my resume. But I think it bears saying that there are certain situations in which your brand is always going to carry the numbers in a way that is sort of above and beyond the power of the social media manager, and that at this point, especially in the good old days, I think you could count on old-fashioned virality of posts and and sort of word of mouth and sharing to build up a community, and you had, I think, a lot of control if you were good at it to grow a page faster or slower, depending on your ability to engage people. I think that's way diminished now, and mostly your page growth is going to be determined beyond a certain threshold. I mean, sort of beyond the immediate network of people that you can contact directly. I mean, and I say sort of beyond the number of people that would fit in a CC line of an email. That's being determined, one by just your general brand awareness, the number of people in the world who know about what you do and who you are, and by the algorithms that are used to determine what gets suggested to who, in terms of pages to follow and people to follow and so on. So I think understanding that, and that was the way things were going, and that that the bigger UN agencies are sort of brands in and of themselves, at least within the UN community. My job has always been one of brand building, in trying to acquaint a wider number of people with the work and the value propositions of the organizations that I've worked for, which was with WFP a really easy sell, because WFP does very impactful work, and in ways that that are easy to describe in the sort of fraction of a second that you have to make that kind of a sell in the context of social media. And they also did a lot of fundraising, and that helps as well, because that has value for people. People want to be able to help. They want to be able to donate money in ways that helps. And of course, we had this sort of auxiliary fundraising operation going on, which went hand in hand with social media. But it was always a very online savvy team. It still is. I'm still in touch with the guys over there, and they're still very much at the head of their class in terms of community management and in terms of online engagement. I think the situation was very different here at ILO in the sense that we, like probably many of you who are watching today, are very policy oriented. We're very thoughtful. The impact that we make is very long term, and in some senses it's sort of hard to understand unless you're a policy thinker that's familiar with what we do. Mm-hmm. So the question then becomes, well, given that we want to build our brand, who do we want to build it with? Where does it make the most sense? I mean, is it really useful for the ILO as an organization to have sort of 18-year-old kids in Canada, let's say, know who we are, or is it something that we want to focus more on a much different demographic? We want to focus on, say, voters in Bangladesh, for example, and these are the sorts of questions that you sort of have to ask yourself. I think at the outset of a much longer-term social media strategy, the question is always going to be, who is this for? What is the overall benefit?
Yep, and who's your target audience, which I think for WFP was completely different. I guess in WFP, the main John Doe around the corner was interested in how to feed a child or how to feed refugees. I think it was much easier in that environment than in an environment which is more policy-oriented, more think tank-oriented as ILO, where not every single John Doe is probably part of your target audience.
Well, it is. I mean, here's what I've come to understand, and it's taken me a while to figure this out. But yeah, I think when you're counting engagement by the numbers, yeah, that's a lot easier. And that's what we always did, because again, the numbers is really the ace in our sleeve, I think, as social media professionals and as web professionals in general. But it's funny because the quality of the amount of engagement that I tend to see surrounding the ILO is less, also because the community is smaller. But the quality of the engagement in terms of content and feedback and just the kinds of input that we get from fans and followers around the world is way more complex, because we're talking about policy, and ILO has very specific policy recommendations that not everybody agrees with, which is great, because that's the kind of thing that generates a discussion. And if you're a community manager trying to nourish a dynamic community, that's exactly what you're looking for. It's also hard sometimes, because you have to kind of balance the position of the organization, with the desire to be open and transparent on social media. But that's what we're here for. That's what our job is.
Yeah, and that's also what the challenge is. If you look back over the past years, you mentioned a number of key success factors. I think I picked up that. Showing the figures and showing the impact of social media, for instance, on the behavior of the website, but also the quality of the interactions, and probably showing that, trying to measure that. Would this be some of the key factors, success factors of your social media campaigns, or what would be your main critical success factors, where you said, okay, we've done well because of ...
Well, I mean, again, I think, and this again, this relates back to the your discussion of teams at the beginning. Is it depends which metric you were looking at. Again, the WFP, I think the metric that people were generally most interested in was trying to show that that engagement on social media was contributing to donations, was contributing to the agency's bottom line. And so that was always our core metric, and that's sometimes hard to do, because at times the impact that you have on social media, it's there, it's just a little intangible and hard to measure, even when you're raising money. which is very tangible and easy to measure.
Mm-hmm.
I think when here at the ILO, the way that the communications is set up anyway, it's much more client-oriented, and we're much more sort of interested in understanding what the client wants. And when I say the client, the client is the client unit, the policy unit, or a work team that that we're trying to help facilitate for. And I think understanding that goes a long way towards spelling out what your success factors are or should be. And in a lot of cases, it's hard to understand whether or not the communication or the outreach was successful or not, because you're communicating to the stakeholders of some other division or some other department, right? So you really have to sort of base yourself on the feedback that they get to understand whether it worked or not, whether the audience was successfully reached, whether things happened that you needed to happen. And I mean, here's a really good example. We did a blog post not too long ago about the potential for cooperatives to create decent work opportunities for refugees from Syria in the countries that are neighboring Syria. And the possibility of helping Syrian refugees start their own cooperatives and manage their own cooperatives in line with things that they already know how to do, because of course they were you have a lot of people who are specialists, who are sort of carpenters and mechanics and things like that. The question is how to get them into business again, and cooperatives seem like a promising avenue. So we worked with them on the blog and the tone and the social media around that, and then we looked back and the traffic to the blog was in line with what we'd expect. It's in line with sort of the average, but there was nothing sort of special there. It wasn't really until we heard back from the unit who said, yeah, this gave us something really strong to share with our network, with our email contacts, and it was showcased at a recent conference, and that was attended by someone from the Turkish Labor Ministry, and now they're talking about funding the project. And there you go. You have a really sort of concrete benefit from this piece of content when the metrics on the website were telling us anything special.
Yeah, indeed. If we talk a little bit just about creating social media teams, online teams, how was your experience in WP and in ILO in creating virtual teams to work with you in your outreach or in your trying to reach your social media targets?
Yeah, well, I mean, the management structure between the WFP and ILO is very different in the sense that we didn't have to recruit volunteers at WFP. People were told social media is your thing now, and you need to do what Justin says basically. So I didn't have to do a lot of the the team building at the beginning, sort of selling people on the value to it. I was just sort of told, look, you have these community managers around the world, and they're basically waiting for you to give them guidelines. They weren't waiting for us to be told what to do, but they wanted guidelines. They wanted to know how to do it well. And so that was really easy. Different setup here at the ILO, where we don't have at the moment people who are sort of explicitly tasked with social media, or at least not in any kind of regular or structural basis. So in some regions we're very strong, and others we're sort of weak. And in most cases, we are having to reach out to country office heads and regional bureau heads and say, look, it makes sense for you to invest in social media for X, Y, and Z reasons. And like you said, I mean, the best way to do that is always by underlining the value to them. And we've come to a place where we're distinguishing between two types of ILO staff who are active on social media. We have our brand managers, and basically these are people who are running. Anyone who runs an account with an ILO logo on it is a brand manager. And there's a certain set of skills that we want them to have. These are not people who are being tasked to speak on the behalf of the ILO as themselves. These are people who are being asked to sort of stand behind the logo and say what the ILO says on certain issues. So those are our brand ambassadors, and we have we're building out a series of training modules for them. in addition, we have our brand ambassadors. So we have brand managers and brand ambassadors. So I don't know if I think I may have accidentally said ambassadors before, but our ambassadors are these are our experts. These are this is senior management. These are the people who can speak on behalf of the ILOs themselves. These are people who know more about youth unemployment and key labor indicators than anybody else in the world, right? These are the people that we want to be sort of championing the ILO, and their expertise confers credibility upon the organization as a whole, and so we're working with them to build their online profiles, which in most cases, except with some rare exceptions, were non-existent before we started working with them. And are still very much in their nascent stages. And the difference between the way that we work with these two groups is, the one is based very much on, helping, conveying, our understanding of ILO's online brand, and making sure that translates well to different markets around the world. And in the other case, it's working with, again, these senior figures to help them build their online brands. So with them, obviously, we're spending a lot of time talking about Twitter and how to use Twitter and finding the value in Twitter. Not just to let the world know about the work that they're doing, but also to spend less time reading the news. To have an easier time getting to the news and the information that they want faster. And also things like Quora, which is it's really exciting because I think it's really blossoming as a place where experts can build their brands, and it's a great place where, in a sense, the brands in the conventional sense, like the logos that so many people I think have accused of ruining the social networks the way that we loved them back in 2010.
Mm-hmm.
They're very much kept out in Quora. Quora is it's kind of a people's only party. And that's a great opportunity if you've got a lot of experts, a lot of people who know a whole lot about one specific subject in your organization. That's a great opportunity for them to use that expertise to let people know more about what you are doing as an organization. So that's the way that we're orienting teams at the moment.
Yeah, and if I understand it well, you're still advocating internally in ILO on certainly when you reach out beyond headquarters on the use of social media. When we work with social media in organizations, we have this starting point where we're still advocating and trying to sell social media and the role of social media to other departments, other managers. But then also there comes at a certain point where it becomes, where people become convinced, but then very often it goes into the other way. And I want to ask this question to you, with your experience, is when it becomes too successful, where country offices, regional offices, projects all start with their own social media channels, where you all of a sudden have too much. So how do you keep the balance as being the corporate, the overall social media coordinator? How do you balance between motivating people to go and contribute on your social media channels, but still trying to keep somewhere a control over what everybody else is doing on social media? So you don't have a Flickr account or 100 Twitter accounts with ILO in the name. How do you balance that?
Yeah, well, that's that's very much where we are at the moment. I think we here at headquarters and here in the communications, we have a pretty solid idea about what ILO's brand should look like and sound like. But then of course you've got sort of social media accounts sprouting up all over the place, and they don't always have the same ideas. And that's I think it's a good thing because it sort of means that we've won the hearts and minds in convincing people of the value of social media. But it's also a challenge because you've got the integrity of the brands to protect, and these are things that have to be managed. In a sense, I think that you have to go and rewrite the rules to make sure that there's a well understood process for starting up new social media accounts. That includes an approvals process, and that even when someone gets the go ahead, they have very clear guidelines to follow for how to how to respect the integrity of the brand. It sounds sort of heavy-handed, but I think in my experience, those guidelines have been very welcomed. These are things that people want. They want to get. They're not in this for the fun of managing a social media account. They're in this because there's some sort of a communications objective that they think that can be reached through social media, and if you can help them reach it, then they're happy to have that help.
So you provide service, trying to provide a service to them.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it's from our standpoint, it's more about rarely I think do we ever sort of discourage people from starting new social media accounts. There are some instances where we'll tell them that we don't think that one social network is terribly well suited towards what they're trying to accomplish. But then again, I've been proven wrong before about what Facebook can and can't do and what Twitter can and can't do, and it's if someone's convinced that they've got a good idea for something, well, that's great. I think we want to be across it.
Yeah, indeed, and it's a very fast-moving target. Also, you started with this from the beginning, where you said, listen, at the time with WP, Twitter and Facebook was still taking shape. Now the tools are more stable, but still, it is a very new market. Let's say 10 years young, with new tools being added every day. So it's still important, I think, to continue being open and experimenting, which makes our jobs also very interesting. Very good, Justin. I'll keep you online. We have our Nigerian correspondent who went offline for a moment because it was getting really hot on the streets of Lagos. Marina, you've been monitoring the Twitch channel. Do you have a number of questions for us?
We do have a number of questions. Sorry, I will try to remove the echo. Okay, do you hear me?
Yes, I do.
Okay, so we have a number of questions, like 9 of them, so I'm not sure we'll be able to take them all.
Marina, just a moment. Could you mute Justin for a moment, because I'm getting feedback via Justin.
Sorry, I don't hear you anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, I asked to mute Justin, which you did.
Okay.
For a moment, I was getting feedback via Justin. Go ahead.
So yeah, we have a number of questions, that's to say around 9, and several comments. So I'm not sure we'll be able to take them all, but maybe I can start, and if we don't get through all the questions, perhaps we can follow up by email afterwards.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So actually the first question was by Diego, and he was asking, how do you know when exactly is the time for forming a team?
Well, it depends on your project. For me, the answer would be the moment your project starts, kick off with a team. Don't sit around waiting too long, philosophizing about what you want to do. Define your main goals. I mean, to me, a project you can write down on one sheet of paper. If it is more than that, it's too complex. So on one sheet of paper, define your project goals, what you want to achieve, and how you want to achieve that. From that moment on, you're ready to take on people in your team. So to me, the answer would be as early as possible. I don't know if Justin has something to add on this. Marina, if you can unmute Justin for a moment. Justin?
Yeah, no, I agree. That's your first order of business in most cases is to start with the team.
Very good. Alumide, I think you're back. Can we check if Alumide is back? No.
No, he's not back.
Okay, very good. So that was a quick answer, Marina. Go ahead.
How do you motivate the volunteering social media reporters? It's clear for the on-site team, but what about the online volunteers? And do you have some very specific examples for that?
Yeah, it is much easier to motivate an on-site team. As I said in the introduction, it's easier when you manage a team in a work environment, for instance, where it is easy to get the people physically in a room. Where it's easier to control the dynamics I mean, you can look people in the eye, you can have a beer if something doesn't go well. With online teams, this is very different. So the dynamic and the way to work with an online team has the same basic principles, but has its own quirks. And indeed, keeping an online team motivated, even though a big part of what they can get out of it, the training on site, is not there. For me, in my experience, working with volunteers, it is really important that you keep on bringing back added value to those people, so people can learn. So try to assess with your online team what their expertise is, what they want to get out of the team, what they don't know, what they're shy of trying, and encourage people to experiment in a safe environment so they can learn. So having people learn during the months in the project while doing, and giving the space to experiment on a neutral basis. So if they want to try something and it doesn't work out, that's fine. You know, it's agreed experimental base. This is one. The second one is what they can get out of it. If you work really well with a team, it is this common spirit of we're doing something better. And we have, especially in our environment, we only work, or I only work with non-profit organizations. Justin also worked with non-profit organizations. For many of us, this is the case. So we have an added thing that we can plug into, is that people we work for the better good. We don't work for a commercial company where the goal is a larger profit, but we work for the better good of the world. So that by itself, when you get the volunteers in a team, if you work for a non-profit goal, make sure that people don't lose the context of what are we trying to do. We're not trying to do social media for the sake of social media. We're actually doing social media for a conference, which is, for instance, trying to protect the forest, try to advocate for the role of forests in climate change, etc., as an example. So keep people connected to the ground on those for the better world. To me, is a good motivator. And of course, when a team dynamic picks up, the feeling of achievement that as a team we work together and we reached those key performance indicators is very rewarding. People almost celebrate online. Justin, you have something to add on this?
In addition to what you said, no, I think you pretty much captured everything from my end.
Okay, very good. The next question you're gonna answer first, Marina. What's the next one?
I guess I will need to skip some, but one could be, what is the best strategy to mobilize both experts people and new users?
I didn't get the question. Could you repeat again?
What could be the best strategy for being able to mobilize both experts users and new users?
What was the first one? Expat users?
Experts.
Expert both expert users and new users. Justin, you want to take that one first?
Sure. Well, I mean, it's fair. It's not often that I've had to motivate expert users. I think most users get to be experts. They find their own motivation. I think the trouble has always been sort of motivating new users, especially of the variety that have a lot to offer on social media. That have a lot of expertise, or that have a lot of a point of view that people would be really interested in, but that have some sort of computer literacy issues. They're not comfortable working on online platforms in general, and sort of getting past that hurdle, motivating them past that is it can be somewhat of a challenge. And in some cases, it's one that you just can't get over, especially when you've got a lot of senior level people who hardly have time for anything, and you're putting one more thing on their plate. Even if they are kind of interested in it, especially when it's something like Twitter. And I think that this is the community manager. It's like the holy grail is to get like the expert senior manager from 0 followers to a lot of followers and using Twitter every day, by the end of the year. It's really hard to do because, as anyone who's just started using Twitter can tell you, that, you've got like no feedback for, it could be weeks or months. I mean, if you're just like, talking into the void. And it really, even if you're a very important, very influential person, we all start at the same even playing field on when we first join the network. So that can be getting people past that. I think what I've always tried to emphasize is not so much the information that they not the personal benefit that they get from being well known, but the value of the information that they get. Because I think Twitter's first appeal for me. The reason that I check Twitter first thing in the morning isn't because I have something to say. It's because I want to know what's happening. And I think once you start there, it also helps people understand what the value is for other users. And if you can start people using social media like that, like it was meant to be used, then later down the line, when they've got a more developed interest in it, you can avoid having situations where you're sort of being asked just to sort of share things, just to put it out there because it's up and it's interesting to the people who are working on it. Anyone who uses Twitter knows that Twitter doesn't work like that, and that you have to. If you want it to be interesting, it has to be if you want people to click on it, it has to be something that will be interesting once they see it in their feed. And that's really hard to get your head around if you're not a Twitter user, right? So that helps, I think, as a long-term strategy to circumvent, what can sometimes be bad or unrealistic requests from other units or management and things like that.
Yeah, indeed. And this was the input. Marina, could you mute just because I'm getting feedback again. And this is working on in a professional environment where the new user is, say, the manager, the senior manager you're trying to get onto social media. In the environment of working with volunteers, where you have a mix of very experienced social media people, as well as completely novices, as we often have. And you want to contribute something for both of them. Well, if I answer the question in that context, for me, the very first thing to agree on is that nobody knows everything. Even people who do social media professionally, full-time, like myself, every single day or every single weekend, certainly every single project, every single workshop that I do, I learn something new, and people come up with tools or ways to use tools that I haven't heard before or have never experienced before, didn't dare to touch before. So start with both for expert users and new users. Certainly when you build an online team, with the onset, say, nobody is an expert in anything. One is more experienced than the other. But then there is somewhere in the past year something that worked very well. If you have a very polarized group of very experienced people as well as new people, is to team people up. So we start with a mentorship, or we call it very often the elders. So somebody becomes a Twitter elder. You take one or two of the most experienced Twitter people, and you team them up with a team of 10 or 20 online people who would like to know Twitter and like to see what the possibilities are to use Twitter. Or the same with the Facebook experts or blogging experts. So you team up an experienced blog editor, blog writer with people who've never written a blog post before. And that also helps you create a team, matching people who want to share their expertise, and also that makes them grow. When you share, you automatically learn, as well as the people that are willing to pick up those skills. And that, of course, you cannot do if you have only a team of 10. But as the group grows, I would try to match both the expert and the new users, Marina. That would be my input. Marina, what I would suggest is that why don't we do the following? There were a number of questions that came up. Why don't we put each of the questions in a comment on the announcement blog post of this webinar? And then both Justin, myself, or Illumidi could answer each of those questions on the blog post comments. What would you think about that?
Indeed, I think it's the best way. Sorry, guys, that we are not able to address all your questions, but indeed, I think it's a great idea, Peter. We carry on the discussions online through the blog posts that serve to promote this webinar. Anyway, do you have some words to wrap up the discussions, Peter, or should I wrap up now?
Well, for me, the important things to take home is it's very different when you work with online teams as well as physical teams. Social media gives you a number of tools that you can use to build your online team and to use social media for your outreach. As usual with social media, I would ask you to think before you jump. Think what you want to reach, how you want to reach it, how you want your team to be formed, but don't think for too long. Don't just stand at the edge. Do jump in the end. That's my basic baseline, Marina. Go ahead.
Okay, so to address the concerns in the chat box, we will. I did take all the questions that were raised in the chat box, and we will carry on the discussions online through the blog post. So basically, I want to thank you first, the guest contributors, Peter, Idowu, and Justin. This was really a very stimulating and informative webinar, and I hope all our participants did enjoy and had great insights on how we can use social media to mobilize a team effectively. And we thank you all to be here with us today. And so this webinar is recorded, and it will be available on YPARD YouTube channel. And very shortly, we will send you the link via email. And also through this email, we shall send you a very short survey to assess how useful this webinar was to you. And so please, we really welcome your feedback to really understand what is your specific needs and how you want it to be addressed. So again, we will carry on the discussions online. We will provide you all the links to be able to ask your questions and get feedback from Peter, Idowu, and Justin. So bunches of thanks to all of you again. Bye to our guest contributors, and bye to all. And we'll close the broadcast now.
Thank you, everybody.